have attachments unbeknownst to them. They carry them around. Sometimes they're fairly benign. They only cause you to lose energy. Like you try, oh, why am I so tired all the time? Why am I so, I think those attachments could also be malevolent attachments, maybe demonic attachments or some minor demonic thing that is weighing you down. Maybe it's not a full possession, but it's a monkey on your back. Experience leads to belief, and belief leads to more experience. So once you have this big experience, then you come to believe that there is this other world or this other dimension or these other things that are possible. And that brings more experience, which then increases your belief. And then it just gets wide open if you let it.
Tonight, we take a look at almost everything paranormal. Bruce Solheim is a professor that has experienced hauntings, aliens, UFOs, cryptids, and he's written 3 books about those experiences. Dr. Bruce Solheim is in the studio. That and more is coming right up on My Alien Life. My Alien Life is recorded high atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is heard all over the world, and you can listen everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you'll find links to every episode, stories, photos, and much more. I am your host, Cameron Logan. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three, two, one, zero, and liftoff.
My guest tonight is a professor, an author, a playwright, a comic book wizard, and Bruce, can I add musician? Is that your music on your website?
Yes.
All right. So
Yeah.
I listened to the music on your website. I wasn't sure who to give credit. He's a musician as well. So Bruce is also a U.S. Army veteran, and I couldn't be happier to have him with me here tonight. Bruce Solheim, thank you so much for joining me, and welcome.
Well, thank you, Cameron, for having me on your show.
Yeah, you're one of those guys that I've been watching from a distance for a while, and I've known about you and kind of took a look at your books and interesting life. And usually when I prepare for an interview like this, I start out with Wikipedia. I couldn't find you there. And the second place I go with professors is ratemyprofessors.com. Mm-hmm. And that's where I was getting, you did amazing, by the way.
I've been teaching a long time.
It's a 4.5 out of 5. That's great with 192 ratings. I would think most students who are unhappy would go there, but if students are happy and they usually do nothing. So if you throw out the highest and lowest score, like in gymnastics, you're almost a perfect 10 or a 5. That's as high as you get there. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's an important tool. It's not scientific or whatever, but you can get a pretty good snapshot of a professor. I always do that when I hear some, a talking head on the news or something. I know they're a professor. I'll go there just to see what the students are saying. I think it's important to know what the students are saying too. Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's a good commentary on you because there are the ones out there who do nothing but complain. But I think it's a different world than when I was in college. I think we have some responsible people out there now, for the most part. And, if they have good role models, they end up turning out pretty decent. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with my students.
Awesome. So we're both Norwegian, according to Ancestry.com. I'm 26%.
Yeah, I'm probably, I'm 100%, I think. 100%. My parents are from Norway, so.
Yeah. I was used to be able to speak a little bit when I was a kid, but my vocabulary's been exhausted over the years, and I concentrate my studies on my English side of the family because I'm an avid Anglophile and English history person. So, that's where my interest. But still have family over there and still communicate. So, do you have a lot of family over there? Do you still spend some time? Because you did some writing about Norway, I noticed on Amazon.
Oh, yeah. I've been there many, many times. It's been a couple years now, but I go there very often. And keeping up with we still have property. We still have a house there where my dad was born. It's over 120 years old. I think the house, the farm. My cousins kind of take care of it. But yeah, that's where, except for my brother and my children, and I have one nephew up in Seattle. Everybody else is over in Norway. So
when you first popped onto my radar, of course, I don't even remember when that was, but I don't know if you're still teaching, if you've retired, but you've wrote a trilogy, which is available on Amazon, and they came out pretty close to each other. I know the first one is in a second printing, but and that one is Timeless, Paranormal History. You write about the spirit world, alien world, and quantum world, and you talk about them as being the same. Can you explain that a little bit? Because that's confusing to a lot of people who really like to differentiate between the three.
Yeah, that's my theory, and it's not just mine. There are some physicists and researchers who are also are in general agreement about that. But yeah, my idea is that the spirit world, the alien world, and the quantum world are all the same thing. And the idea, like when people report seeing ghosts, they appear out of nowhere, then they disappear. They can go through walls, ceilings, windows. Same thing when people report alien contact, the aliens, they pop in out of nowhere, they can disappear. They can make you disappear with them, So that's just kind of an indicator there. And then I'm a historian, not a physicist, but from my understanding of quantum physics, subatomic physics, this idea that that it's not the world that we see. It's a very different world where time is running in all directions. Actually, it's immaterial, and that things are waves, they're particles, depending on whether you're looking at them or observing them. So I think that best describes what's going on, as far as I can tell, in my experiences.
So do you think that there's a perhaps mistaken identity when people see an alien and possibly mistake it for an angel, or vice versa?
I think that could happen. That obviously could happen, and it depends on what if you subscribe to this idea that alien entities, non-human entities like that could, or extraterrestrials could somehow plant some kind of what do they call it, a screen memory, right? Or a replacement memory where you think it's a ghost, or you think it's something else, or an owl, or I mean, there's all kinds of different examples. But so it's hard to. It's, I think, sometimes very hard to tell. But if you read most of the experiences that people have had, there starts to be kind of a pattern with the ET experiences, including missing time and all that type of stuff, and even physical effects.
Right. So let's back up a few years and try to describe for me what experience came first for you. I mean, how old were you, and what was the first experience that you had? And obviously you've had quite a few since then.
Yeah. Well, it's the 3 books document 89 different paranormal experiences. That includes everything from ghosts and angels and demons and telepathy and telekinesis and bilocation and alien stuff, UFO stuff. I mean, it's all in there. The first paranormal experience that I had was when I was 4 years old in northern Norway. We were visiting my grandmother, and it was wintertime, And I got very, very sick very suddenly while I was outside, where I could barely move. I couldn't move my head from side to side. My neck was totally stiff. I had a high fever. I came home to my grandmother's house, this old farmhouse I told you about that's 120 years old. And I was in the kitchen, lying down on a small bed that my grandmother had in the kitchen because she couldn't go up the steep stairs all the time. So she liked to take naps there. So I was lying down there, and the relatives from next door were coming over and saying, "Oh, this is what happened to Uncle Hans when he got polio. You know, this is the same thing." And then somebody else had it, and they died the next day. And so I was terrified. Even though I was 4, I understood that this was something really, really bad. My mom was crying, and so I fell into this kind of restless sleep. And when I woke up, nobody was in the kitchen, and what was above me was this bright, warm light. And this light was like, it made me feel like there was nothing wrong, that everything was going to be okay. I wasn't afraid anymore. I felt like I was totally, protected and saved, and when I got up in the morning, I was completely fine. I had no symptoms at all of whatever this malady was, which I still don't know what it was. My grandmother and my mother both said it was my guardian angel, and that it was a healing experience. So that is the first experience. And what that did, I believe, was kind of open the doors for me for the rest of my life.
Now, when you say open the doors to that kind of experience, or open the doors to many, many different experiences, including angels, cryptids, haunted houses, telepathy, telekinesis?
I think it opened up the doors of perception, if you put in William Blake's words. But yes, it opened up everything. The aperture opened wide, and I was able to see these things and experience these things a lot easier. And then my mom was very psychic, so there's some bloodline kind of stuff going on. We used to practice reading each other's minds, like just a deck of playing cards. We'd get a pretty good hit rate, much greater than chance. And we would do that until my dad told us to knock it off, because he didn't believe in any of that. He was a fisherman and a carpenter, a very practical man, and he'd get upset and tell us to put it away. And then my mom would just look at me and wink, So we knew we had that special connection. Now, she wasn't a practicing psychic or anything, but she was very, very psychic. So I think what it does is that when you have, I've had my spirit friend, Gene, who I can talk about later. But anyway, he told me that experience leads to belief, and belief leads to more experience. So once you have this big experience, then you come to believe that there is this other world, or this other dimension, or these other things that are possible. And that brings more experience, which then increases your belief. And then it just gets wide open if you let it.
Sure. Did any of your family have any concerns about this when you were a youngster? Because obviously there have been kids who have had lesser kind experiences than yourself.
Yeah, I think that, once you start going to school, I had 2 what I would call imaginal playmates. And they were unusual in that everybody has probably imaginary or imaginal playmates, but mine were very real to me. And when I started going to school, I remember talking about them to my teachers and even to other adults, and they told me that was foolish and that's not real. And now that I'm in school, I have to be serious and I can't be talking about stuff like that. So I learned pretty quickly that in polite society that I was being conditioned into, you can't really talk about that stuff. And, that's just, it's not real. But I always kept in the back of my mind, and probably because of my mother, the way she was and very accepting, and, the psychic abilities that she had, that I always kept it in the back of my mind that it is real, and I'll just pretend to other people that it's not real. And that way I can be safe.
In your book, you use the term other non-human intelligences. What do you consider non-human intelligences? Well,
most people think of aliens or extraterrestrials, but there are other entities out there. I guess you could say entities. I don't think that that demons were ever human, and I've had terrible experiences with those, the negative stuff. I don't like to dwell on the negative, but I mean it has happened. And then angels, I'm pretty much convinced they've never been human. And then extraterrestrials, like I said, and I'm even open to the concept that some of what we think are aliens could in fact be future humans. I've entertained that idea, and in fact, my friend Gene, who I keep mentioning, he's in the spirit world now. He's passed away in 2016. He once told me, he said that we are the aliens, which is an interesting concept. In other words, we're all related. I had a friend of mine who teaches at Montana Tech. And now his name
Michael
Masters. Michael Masters. Yeah, I went to Montana Tech back in 1982. I dropped out, but anyway, I was in engineering school, but that was long before he got there. But he wrote a book called Identified Flying Objects, which that's his theory that these are that the aliens are future humans. I think that could be one possibility, but I think there's lots of different entities out there. There's like a whole selection, a big menu of them.
You mentioned that humans as aliens, which is interesting to me because we basically compare other bipedal organisms or aliens or anything that we see, whether they be ghosts or other non-human intelligences, to ourselves, and those anthropomorphic beings that are out there. I would think that if there are, as deep as space is, and I was talking to Dr. Avi Loeb the other day, and as many trillions of galaxies that are out there, there would have to be some mind-blowing biology that's occurring on some other planets, and it's so unlikely for us to meet ourselves out there. So, have you ever had any experiences with any entities or aliens that you felt were from another planet that weren't bipedal and were vastly different than us? It's a long question.
Yeah, no, I know what you're getting at. Well, the experiences that I've had have been with, I've had some with, the classic, grays, and I had an insectoid experience. I had a couple of experiences with the reptilians, who are, quite frightening. I don't know about those that maybe have a different form, although some are shape-shifting, like the ancient alien mystic that I have a communication with. I take spirit walks about every other day, and I have this guy named Anzar, and he has different forms. He comes in different forms. So I think that I don't know what his natural form is. He's presented himself in different ways, but most of the time I just hear him. I don't really see him, although I have seen him on occasion. And somebody else actually saw him once too, who was with me. He sometimes appears like a Kachina doll. Have you ever seen those?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, or like a proto-human sometimes, but other times he doesn't present himself like that at all. He's just energy. So I would say he'd be the closest to something that would be not necessarily in the form that we're used to, So, but so I've had those experiences, and I'm open to whatever experiences are out there, as long as I do have protection when I do these spirit walks, and because I'm not going to say I control my ability to make these connections, but I manage it much better than I used to. And that's just really been the last 4 years that I've been able to manage the connections better. Because before it was just frequent and random, and I didn't know when I was going to have an experience or a connection. And now I can better manage it. I know how to facilitate it. I know how to shut it down. And I always tell people it's more important to learn how to shut it down than it is to turn it on.
So
open yourself up.
with these random visitations, have they ever been unsettling at times? Is it something you had to get used to?
Yeah, in fact, what I would consider the first extraterrestrial experience I had was in 1964 when I was 6 years old. And unsettling, traumatizing, but ultimately for the better. Actually, that experience actually was very helpful for me. But I did suffer because for 2 years after that experience in 1964, I could barely speak. I had a terrible speech impediment, stammering, that came on suddenly at age 6. And for 2 years, I had to go to speech therapy. And I was so reluctant to speak. It was really, really terrible. And to think that now, I've been a professor for 30 years, I speak for a living, to think that at one time I didn't think I'd ever be able to speak. I think that was as a result of that, the shock of that experience I had when I was 6 years old, even though ultimately it ended up being a good experience, helping me, actually rescuing me, but just the shock of the experience itself. And I've had other, I've had some close calls with demonic entities when I didn't have any ability to manage or control what was going on. I just, or I was foolish, that happened as well.
Did the stuttering go away overnight, or was this a gradual transition into normal speech?
It was gradual. Actually, it's still there. I think what happens is that I've created new neural pathways. So I can feel it, like it's there, but I've learned over my 62 years, that I've been alive, I have now learned to quickly facilitate a different path. So if I think I'm going down the wrong path, I can almost seamlessly shift in my brain to continue communicating. So it is still there, but I've just learned how to adapt. I think that's the best way to describe it. And it's a very difficult thing. I have a great deal of sympathy and empathy for those folks that have stammering and stuttering problems. I like that movie, The King's Speech. I really enjoyed that film for many reasons, but that was one of the reasons. I know what that's like.
So why you? Why does one person have all these kinds of experiences when some would think that out of 5, 2 would be too many, yet you still consider yourself lucky?
Yeah. Well, I had a friend of mine he's actually a remote viewer, but he said his theory is that everybody's as psychic as they need to be. So I feel that I have certain abilities and I have them for a reason. And I think the reason it's become very clear the last 4 years since my friend Gene died. And it was a month after he died in 2016. So in October of 2016 that he came to me in a vision. And a vision of somebody who speaks to me who's passed on would not be unusual. I mean, I've had that before. But he was very clear in his communication with me, just like we're talking, only I could see him too. And he was telling me that it's time to tell my stories, all the paranormal things that have happened, that the time has come for me to do that. And I was quite fearful of doing it, I had written all these things down. I'd been journaling and writing stories, but I kept them to myself largely, except for a few, family members or whatever. But he said, no, it was time. And he even gave me a title for the book. He said, you should call it Timeless, because where I am, there is no past, there is no future. It's just the eternal now. And so that's why I called it Timeless. And I went ahead, the first book dealt with I didn't go into the more bizarre stuff. I tried to keep it, the ghost stories and, stuff like that. Second book, I went a little bit further. And the third one, I brought in everything. Threw everything in, including the kitchen sink in the third one. So my fears were unfounded because I didn't get fired from my job, an academic, history professor. I thought my colleagues would reject me. The college would try to get rid of me. My students would laugh at me, but that was not true. In fact, people come to me oftentimes, kind of privately and say, here's what's happened to me. and they feel like I'm a safe person to talk to. So I think I serve a greater purpose than I thought by telling these stories. And I've actually had people, because I talk about being able to communicate with those that have passed on. I've had people that are mourning the death of a loved one or a friend, and they'll come to me and ask, me to contact them, and I'll do it. I don't do it for money. I just do it as a favor to them. And sometimes I can make those connections and provide them with some kind of closure or, something that makes them feel better. And that's the whole purpose, I think, is to help other people. I think that's the reason I have these gifts, and I'm not, there's people that are a lot more psychic and a lot more, whatever. But I think I've had just a great, a wide variety of experiences, so that, rather than just a ton of experience in one thing, I've had this wide variety. And I think that's because I've had a very open mind, and my, that aperture was opened very early in my life.
Do you think because we are basically, when we look at ourselves as something that we're really not, we're basically waves of light. Do you think that we could consciously achieve a state where time doesn't matter, because either there's some sort of disconnect or connection where time seems so relevant to us now, but it really isn't, is it?
Yeah, no, you're right. The other day, Anzar told me, this ancient alien mystic who I communicate with, he started off our communication by saying that all of this is an illusion, remember? So it reminds me that, we've created this reality, that the way things truly are in the quantum world, the way everything's all connected, it's much different. And I'll give you actually a practical experience, something that happened to me and my son. A couple of years ago, we were driving to go to the gym to work out or whatever. And I looked down, this is in Southern California, and we were coming up to an intersection, and the light I noticed was green, but then something fell on the floor, and I reached down just momentarily, just like a split second, to grab it. The light, for some reason, turned red, and there were two cars. I was going about 45, and two cars were coming from either side very quickly. So here I was in the middle of this intersection going through a red light, and these two cars are about to double T-bone us in this intersection, which would have been if not a fatal collision, at least very serious injuries. All of a sudden, time kind of slowed down to a snail's pace. Just slowed down. And I was able to maneuver like threading through the eye of a needle and through this intersection and make just the right turns and accelerate just right. So till I was through the other side, and my son and I were safe. And then all of a sudden, time sped up and got back to normal again. And that was an example. I caught another glimpse of the quantum world, where time is immaterial, and you can do all these, and kind of like, what's the movie with the Matrix, right?
Right.
So I think that I've had that experience, and it reminds me that it's that, like Anzar said, this is an illusion.
Well, I know of anybody that's really been through a traumatic hard time, or I guess the easiest example to think of is when you're sitting there waiting for something good to happen, and time goes by so slowly, which is basically relative to the situation that you're in. And it seems that when you're in a good situation and you're happy, your life is considerably better, and time takes on another essence. Did we somehow lose touch of how to manage time, 500,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago? And when did that happen? Why do you think that happened? And is this preparing us for something else or somebody else to manage our time in the future? Well,
that's a really interesting question. I think
poorly put, but I struggle to spit that one out. But you made me think a lot, Bruce.
What you're talking about, I've been told by Anzar and other spirit guides that I have, and that or my spiritual advisors, that we're entering into an era of reconversion. And I've asked them to explain it to me. And oftentimes when I ask them to explain something, it's hard for me to understand. But I think what they mean by an era of reconversion is that we're going to be going back to a time when all of this stuff made sense to us and it was part of our daily life, where we have lost that in the modern age, And it's also, they've also told me that it will take a leap of consciousness, not a leap of faith. We're usually taught, take a leap of faith, but a leap of consciousness for us to achieve this reconversion, which will then make everything much better for all of us as we live in this world and other worlds and, interconnected through different dimensions. And I think that's what we're in the process of. And that's why if you talk to a lot of intuitives and psychics and other people, they're all talking about this. They've used different terms, but I've called it, because that's what I'm told. I'm not even saying I coined the term. I've been told it's the era of reconversion, and it's a leap of consciousness. And I think that helps explain what we were before, whether it's indigenous societies that had a very different concept of time and life, and how they were so close to the earth and close to the elements. And now, we hardly pay attention to it because we're inside, we're doing all this stuff, we're integrating into the machine, and we're becoming like machines. And I think this will be good for us, and it'll also reconnect us to these paranormal abilities that we've always had, that we've snuffed out. We snuffed them out, like I said, with my teachers, and they didn't do it to be malicious, but, just saying, that's not real. Oh, you don't talk to people that aren't there, and, that type of thing. We've been taught, it's been kind of driven out of us, and we're going to reconnect to that. And I've had, when I teach my class, I teach a paranormal class at the college, and in addition to my standard history classes, but I'll have skeptics in the class, and they'll say, well, what proof do you have of, the paranormal? And I'll tell them my experience. And they say, well, that's anecdotal. How about for me? How can I? So I'll tell them, have you ever felt like somebody's staring at you? And then you turn around and sure enough, somebody's staring at you. How does that, have you had that happen more than once? Yeah, several times. Well, how do you explain that? Well, intuition or instinct or something. Well, I said, well, what do you think that is? That is a paranormal ability. I mean, you don't have eyes in the back of your head, right? So that is a sixth sense. That's something you feel. And that's something that ancient people cultivated and had and actually needed to survive. So that's been passed down to us, but we don't use it. And so I think part of this reconversion and this leap of consciousness is connecting to those things that helped our, the ancient people survive.
Do you think we could escape our conscious mind and or body to, astral project or travel beyond our earthly selves?
I think we can. I know we can. I mean, we do it every night, right? I think part of our dreaming is that. And I've never projected myself onto another, at least as far as I know, onto another planet, although I think there are different dimensions right here, just 3 feet away from me right now, there's people and things going on, maybe even alternate me's, talking, doing different things, but still me somehow. So I think that this leap of consciousness will allow us to escape this linear view that we have of our life. And I think what I'm hoping, and the first book actually talks about this, First Timeless book, is that if we can let go of most of this fear of death, that we could really live and we could use all the things that we have natural in us to connect to the natural world, to the supernatural world, the paranormal. And I think our lives will be much better, and we'll probably get along a lot better, because I think that fear is what drives a lot of the negativity, people's fear of death. And so that's one of the first things that when I really opened myself up 4 years ago and started doing regular spirit walks, it's not that you totally lose your fear of death, because there's still that, you don't want to die in a horrible way or painful or whatever, but I know that there's something beyond. because as Gene said, that when he first contacted me after he died, I asked him what a lot of people would ask if you suddenly saw a person who had just died and all of a sudden they're there talking to you. I said, "What's it like to be dead?" And he said, "Well, I don't feel like I'm dead. I'm in a different place, but I'm still me. I'm still conscious of, who I am." And he said, "Besides, if I was dead, could I be talking to you?" So I had to laugh when he said that. And so he told me that everything was okay and I didn't have to fear dying. And he had died, he was only 59 years old. He died of cancer. And it was very, very sad. I mean, he just went really quick. And it seems like a lot of these he was a wonderful person. I know everybody said, nobody mean ever dies, right? But he really was a very decent, nice, caring person. And he is that way in the spirit world too, and has helped me quite a bit.
Okay, so then as a Norwegian Lutheran, what is the life that comes next, and do we still coexist with aliens, angels, demons, etc.?
He tells me that, I asked him actually, yes, I think it is the same realm, but there's different, as he said, I asked him, I said, well, what about, the people that are really bad, have really done terrible things, the Hitler type people, are they there with you? And he said it in a very funny way. He had a great sense of humor. He said, well, they're in a different zip code. So they're there somewhere, but they're not exactly with him. But it is in that realm. And I think that's where all these other things operate as well. And that's how they're able to, come into our, touch our world and then suddenly leave, just when you're about to go get somebody, hey, come and see what's in here. And then all of a sudden they're gone. I think they're able to do that because they're operating in this quantum world, not in this physical world that we've created for our own reality, for the sake of our reality.
Demons, what do we tell somebody or someone who's experiencing a possession or experience with demons that is beyond their control?
Avoid them at all costs. That's my advice. But seriously, I mean, that is some terrible stuff. That's some of the more negative aspects of it. That's why I always say you have to, if you're going to operate in this area, in this realm, do these kinds of things, you have to learn first. You have to learn how to protect yourself. And you can do it in different ways. If you're a religious person, you have some kind of religious practices you've used, prayers, amulets, whatever you got, use everything you got to protect yourself. And the other thing is to learn how to turn it off. Because I read a book once, I think it was called Psychic Self-Defense or something, a long time ago. And they said the easiest way to avoid being harmed by demons or any of that is just don't believe in them. That's the easiest way, but that's pretty hard for people because we're conditioned, right? So we know that we fear that these things, or we know that they exist. So having protection and then limiting your exposure and knowing when to turn it off. So like when I have my spirit walks, I have protection prayers that I say, and then I open myself up. It's kind of like a radar dish opens up. And with the protection, I then open up and I say that I only want to contact, certain people or certain entities or whatever. I name them. And I don't let anybody else in. Or actually, my protectors, my spirit guides, don't let anybody else in. And if you don't do that, you could run into a lot of trouble. I had an experience, and it was my own fault. It was a couple of years ago, I think January 2019, and I knew better. But after I was on one of these, midnight talk, radio shows, I was contacted by a film producer, and he said, "I live in Chicago, or in the Chicago area, and I want to bring you out to test your psychic abilities because I'm doing a documentary and a series, and I think you'd be perfect for it, and I'd like to bring you out." And I said, "Well, I'll only come out if I can bring my wife Ginger with me." And he agreed he'd pay for us to stay there and to fly out. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to really show this guy what I can do. Well, I already made the first mistake, which is to let pride take over, hubris, right? So I went there thinking, I'm going to really show this guy what I can connect with. And he took me to a couple places, and I made some interesting connections, but it was kind of like a warm-up thing. And then he took me to this one place, south side of Chicago, and he didn't tell me anything about the place except that it was a very dark place. That's all he said. So it was kind of like I had to figure it out. So the minute we pulled into this Aldi's parking lot in this very bad part of the south side of Chicago, and I got out of the parking lot, out of the car, and immediately I started to pick up, and I put my radar dish up, didn't do any protection prayers like I'm supposed to. I didn't do any of my protocol. And I opened it up, and I immediately saw, like it was a scene from the 1890s. These people in dark clothing were rushing back and forth. There were horses and buggies, and everything was moving. Everybody was kind of ignoring me, except for this one man in front of me who was just staring at me quietly. And he had a derby hat on, a dark overcoat, one of those curly Q mustaches, and very dark, menacing eyes. And he was looking at me, and he was very frightening. But then that imagery went away. So I thought, I got to reconnect to whatever this is. So I was walking around in this alley, and I went to touch a tree, because I like to touch objects that have been there a long time, rocks or formations or old trees. And I went to touch the tree, and it's just as I was about to touch the tree, it felt like I was tackled to the ground, not just like fall to the ground, but like some big, heavy person tackled me to the ground, and I couldn't get up. And the worst part of it was I'd lost my will to get up. I felt like I was just going to give up. And then I started to see imagery under the ground. I saw images of men, women, and children that were being tortured and that were being dismembered, and they were calling out, out to me, like grasping at me, in agony and pain. And the guy wasn't filming me at the time. He had a mic on me so he could hear what I was saying. And he came running from the car with the camera that he was setting up. And by that time, I was able to get up. And he said, I heard what you were saying. And I said, this is a terrible place. We have to get out of here. And he said, I feel odd too. He felt like a tingling all over his body and felt kind of nauseous. I said, okay, let's get out of here. And we got to the car. He packed up his stuff, and we started to drive away. And I said, well, what is this place? I don't want you to ever take me to a place like this. And he said, well, this is the site of the murder hotel where Dr. H.H. Holmes killed maybe upwards of 300 people in the 1890s, around the time just before the Chicago World's Fair. And that was the site right there in the south side of Chicago. And I was not only psychically attacked, I was physically attacked. When I was driven to the ground, I injured my left knee, and my left big toe was hyperextended. And I was injured. It hurt for about a year after that. I had trouble with my toe, and I couldn't do push-ups and stuff, and I had trouble running and with my left knee. And I told him, don't ever take me to a place like that. I felt like I was ambushed. Now, I know he's a film producer, so he wanted it to be exciting, right? Well, it was a little bit too exciting. And I only have myself to blame because I didn't do my protection before I opened up my radar dish. So it's kind of a cautionary tale.
It's interesting to me that there are these places that are like you just described. Why are these entities bound to an area? Why don't they leave? I mean, thankfully they don't leave and move in with somebody, right? Obviously you have these old houses and people stay away from areas like that, but why are these entities bound to the area, and why don't they leave? Any opinion there?
I don't know. I know there's some things that are residual, very negative energy, or sometimes residual kind of benign energy, but they're not necessarily interactive with you. They don't answer, they don't harm you necessarily. They might frighten you, but it's kind of like a tape loop that keeps playing for whatever reason. I think this was something more than that. I think that this was so horrible what he did in that location. He did torture and kill men, women, and children in that building that had since been torn down, but there were underground passages and dungeons and so forth. I think that residual energy was very, very powerful, coupled with, I think, in my opinion, whatever it was that drove him to do that, the demonic entity that likely drove him to do all that stuff that possessed him, I think was still in that area. And as we were driving away, the producer said, "Look around you." And I said, "Well, it's a very poor neighborhood. It looks like a very dangerous neighborhood." He said, "No, look at the people, look at their faces." And they all looked like they were just completely lost, like they had given up. And they looked so sad. And it was so heavy there. It's hard to describe how heavy the feeling was there. I don't think anything good will ever happen in that area where this took place.
I found out that a long time ago that exorcism is common. And if you have your house blessed, that's a type of exorcism. Other than being an exorcist by experience and research, are there exorcists who are born with that gift?
You know, I think there are. I mean, I do know a guy in Las Vegas. I think he's the real deal. Sean Whittington. I don't know if you've known of him, but when I had a radio show, I interviewed him. Very interesting guy. He, I think, is the real deal. I think that people have a calling. You know, they have a specialty. My specialty, I think, is mediumship and connection. You know, through what I call walking meditation or my spirit walks. I can connect with you know, these with Anzar, an alien entity, and with those that have passed on. Other people have specialties with being able to brave the dealing with these demonic entities. Like I said before, I try to avoid them at all costs. I don't want to deal with them. But luckily, there are people who can deal with it. I have a friend of mine who's a Peruvian shaman. Well, she's not Peruvian, but she's trained by Peruvians in Peru to be a shaman. And she did a cleansing here at the house because we were having some problems with, as it turned out, they were kind of more nuisance elemental type entities that were shaking my son's bed and my bed and pulling our covers in the middle of the night. And one time my son felt like there was somebody on top of him. And so anyway, she came in and did a cleansing of the house and a ritual in the Peruvian shamanic tradition. And after that, we haven't had any problems. So there are people that are very gifted. I think everybody's got a certain gift, you know. And Dean Radin, who's a friend of mine, he's a chief scientist at IONS. I once asked him, I said, I can do this mediumship pretty easily, you know, but I have trouble with remote viewing and some of these other things, you know, it's not so easy for me. And he said, well, it's just like track and field, you know, just because you can throw the discus doesn't mean you can really run the 100-meter in record time. You know, you're going to have a specialty. And not that you shouldn't study other things, but you're going to probably have a specialty, and that's going to be your gift that you work with and that you're supposed to use to help people. So, you know, thank goodness there are people who can do these exorcisms or cleansings because those are very necessary.
Absolutely. And I don't want it. I wouldn't. It wouldn't be on my bucket list at all.
Yeah.
If you get to a point where you've had enough and you're done and over it, do you think you can turn this off?
I think it's a mission, Cameron. It's a mission. I do turn it off temporarily. Like if I want to go to sleep at night, I say my prayers, you know, like I've done since I was a little kid. And I ask for peace and quiet, and I turn it off. I turned off the radar dish. I don't want, you know, and if somebody's insistent, you know, like a spirit that's insistent, I'll just say, hey, you know, I'll catch you next time, you know, but I gotta shut it off. So I can do that. Normally I can do that. Sometimes I'll wake up with a message coming in, you know, that kind of a thing, but most of the time I can shut it off. It does make it difficult in social situations. Even if I shut it off, I don't like big parties, because I hear too much stuff, not just what people are saying, but And it's not that I can read their minds, but I can oftentimes hear people's unspoken intentions, and it creeps me out, and I don't like it. So what I do is I go to a party and, oh, hi. And then I'll go find one person and just look at them and concentrate on them and talk to them. And that way I can it helps me drown out all the other stuff. And it's just, I can understand why somebody could go mad with this, supposedly a gift, right? I think it is a gift, but if you don't learn how to manage it, I think it could cause mental illness. I'm fairly certain of that. Actually, I asked a psychiatrist that once because I thought that was interesting. I said, "Do you think that because I used to be a jail guard and I worked in maximum security, and I used to guard people in the mental wing, the criminally insane, which was the worst place to work. I don't recommend it." And I asked him, I said, "Do you think some of these people that are really mentally ill, like paranoid schizophrenics, do you think that they're very psychic? And maybe they just don't know how to come back to this world to live, even though it is an illusion, to live the reality that we have to live, to do what we have to do in this world?" And he said, "That's an interest." He said, I've thought of that before, that might be true, but the idea of that he says, it really frightens me. And that was a psychiatrist that said that, who deals with people. I mean, think about it. All these people, all these tortured souls, that if they could just manage whatever ability they have that's out of control, maybe they could live, fairly normal lives.
I was talking to my friend who is an exorcist. His name is Tim, and I've done a podcast with him, and we were talking about, he was talking about inherent evil and evil that exists, evil that basically is almost spontaneous and creates itself. But what you brought up was interesting to me, the fact that when you were with a group of people, but it seems to me, and this is not it's an okay example. It's a good example in ways, depending on what your experience has been in the past, but you can get in a group of people who are very close, and I'm talking about maybe even in a work environment where just things turn upside down. After a certain period of time, these people spend so much time together. There starts to be discipline problems in the workplace, in the home. When you bring in somebody from the outside, like sometimes parents who let other kids stay around a house for a long period of time, things just kind of turn upside down, and it's very unexpected, and sometimes there's no rational explanation why that happens, but it seems like evil has just created itself spontaneously. Have you experienced that, or you know what I'm talking about? Does that make sense?
Yes, I would call that attachments. People have attachments unbeknownst to them. They carry them around. Sometimes they're fairly benign. They only cause you to lose energy. Like why am I so tired all the time? Why am I so, and you have these attachments. I think those attachments could also be malevolent attachments, maybe demonic attachments, or some minor demonic thing that is weighing you down. Maybe it's not a full possession, but it's a monkey on your back, And when you get into a social situation, that thing could maybe ricochet around and cause chaos. And of course, I think that's what these demonic entities want. I mean, I think they live for that, or whatever I don't think it's called living, but whatever it is, they feed off of that kind of misery. And the more misery they can cause, the more mischief they can cause, the happier they are, the more fulfilled they are. And it just causes incredible suffering for us. And I think as you become more attuned to this, you just don't want to be part of that. So you actually avoid, if you're really listening to your gut, and your intuition, if you go somewhere and you feel there's like a bad feeling, you just get out of there. I do anyway. I don't want to have to manage that if I don't have to. It's different if you have to. When I worked in a prison, I had no choice. So I had to really develop I used to call it a bubble that I would form around myself to try to survive. But, what's funny is that in that maximum security prison, I had several prisoners come up to me. And these are guys that are, a lot of them in for life, at least one murder, right? And they had no reason to be nice to me or anything, but I had a couple of them come up. I must have been in a very generous mood. They came up and said, "You know what? You don't belong here. You shouldn't be a guard. This is not for you." And you know what? They were right. It was way too hard for me to be there and be around all those people with all these attachments, And I did want to mention to this, that almost all the murderers that I dealt with in prison, in both the military prison and the maximum security state prison, had demonic tattoos. They were marked. They had marked themselves to show this attachment. So not only it wasn't just an invisible attachment, they had actually graphically represented this attachment on themselves, which I think totally connects them to this, this horrible entity, whoever, whatever it may be. And it's just something I noticed when I mentioned it to other guards too. And I even mentioned it to this friend of mine who's an exorcist. And he said he was going to look into that. He said it makes sense because he's had, people that have had demonic tattoos. But he hadn't seen as many, murderers as I had seen. I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds of them. So
I can't even imagine being in that situation. That would
horrible.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's switch gears a little bit. Talk about aliens. Is there a type of alien that's a space traveler that fits the what we've conceived aliens as to be actually as space travelers? They're abduction specialists. They're very, very adept to hiding out between planets or wherever. Is there a type of alien that fits that sort of description?
I think there's all sorts. I think there are those that do that. But I'll preface this by saying that we all see what we need to see. So if you're a nuts and bolts kind of person, you want to see a spaceship. You want to see a craft, right? If you're more of a philosophical person, maybe you just need this connection, this psychic connection or whatever. So it depends on the kind of person you are, what is going to be revealed to you. And I think it was in John Mack's book, or was it, I remember it was John Mack, the late John Mack, the doctor who interviewed so many and treated so many abduction cases, that said, we want you to believe in us, but not too much. That's what one of the abductees had said, that the aliens had told her. We want you to believe in us, but not too much. So I think there are those. I think there's many different types with different agendas, different motives. I kind of compare it, since I'm a historian, I compare it to when the old world met the new world, and there were so many different types of people that showed up. These are travelers, right? And they showed up. Some of them were conquistadors. Some of them were missionaries. Some of them were gold seekers. Some of them were, business people, whatever, settlers. There were all kinds of people that showed up. I think it could be very similar to the experiences we're having, where you have some that, like you said, abduction specialists, they have some kind of genetic material that maybe they need. We hear a lot of those kind of stories. Others, medical experimentation, kind of like, maybe it's, I think a lot of it could be, not necessarily evil. Maybe they're trying to help us. In fact, one of my experiences, it was explained to me that it was a special processing. So I wasn't there to be tortured or anything. It was very frightening, but I think there's many different types and many different reasons and many different ways in which they can present themselves. So to somebody that's approaching this from the outside, they look at this and go, why doesn't everybody have the same story? Well, the truth is there are a lot of similarities to these stories, to these experiences. But there's also a great variety as well. And I think that's very confusing to folks on the outside, and why it's so easy for them to dismiss it. But when you hear people that that are like my friend Terry Lovelace, who's a former Attorney General of Vermont and Assistant Attorney General for American Samoa, Air Force veteran. You hear doctors, you hear lawyers, you hear professional people, all walks of life, including housewives and mothers and bricklayers that have had very similar experiences. I mean, these are very credible people. Now, among those people, there are charlatans, of course, just like there are in the traditional paranormal world, psychics who claim to be psychics that really aren't. They're just really good at cold reading, that type of thing. But there's just so many different experiences. And I always, even with all my experiences, I still have that little bit of skepticism. And I think that's healthy for anybody. You talk to somebody and they claim something, you go, okay, well, that's interesting. You have to look into it. You have to talk to them more. You have to think about it. Maybe I do some research? And then I kind of weigh, how far I want to, believe them or accept what they're saying. And I tend to be very open-minded, but I understand why people are very skeptical. And going back to what I said about my paranormal class, I had a colleague of mine who took the class with kind of the intention to debunk the whole thing, but kind of in that, like a fraternal way, he's kind of just wanted to, rib me about it or whatever. By the time the course was over, he was asking me about spirit animals because he swears that he had a cat that was haunting his house, or not haunting, but appearing in his house, the cat that had passed away a number of years ago. So, I think people come to accept certain things that they didn't realize were paranormal that really are. We do live paranormal lives. We just are taught not to pay attention to it, or we're afraid to pay attention to it for various reasons. But anyway, I hope I answered the question about.
You did. That's very good. So
I went farther than I needed to.
Aliens, based on your personal experience, what are they? Who are they? And is there a plausible alien agenda, even though we're having so many different kinds of experience? It seems there's an underlying hook somewhere there.
I think so. And if you talk to a lot of experiencers and abductees, there seems to be a call. The majority of the, I'll say the more benevolent types are trying to prepare us to save ourselves, and ultimately to save not just us, but them. So we need, the idea that we need to work together, and that's the message that I get. This leap of consciousness is not just because we're all connected. That we are the aliens, right? And it's more than just like, oh, we're aliens. It's like we're all connected. All life in the universe is connected in some way. So that by them helping us, we're really helping them. And I think that is the ultimate mission that most of them are carrying out. That's what I feel in my heart of hearts, what's going on. Because the message I keep getting from Anzar, and he reminds me every other day when I take a spirit walk, he tells me to always keep love in your heart and approach everything from a position of love. And that is the message that I hear from a lot of other experiencers, people that are very authentic in their voice and what has happened to them. And when you think about it, it's gotten me out of a lot of trouble. This idea that I think twice, I try to approach things from a position of love rather than giving way to anger and hate. And it's so easy to do with all the turmoil that's going on in our world. It's so easy to give way to that. And when you do that, you kind of lose track of what the big mission is, which is that we need to help each other. In fact, a spirit told me, a lady who was recently deceased told me, she was a nurse in this life. She said, the main mission you have is to help alleviate the suffering of others. And I think that's what's going on. I think that is the agenda. Now, there are, I think, alien types that have other missions that are kind of complicating things. But as most people know, if they really, with this advanced ability that they have, the ability to come in and out of these different dimensions, they could easily wipe us out if they wanted to, right? The Tic Tac videos and all that stuff we've seen, that their abilities, but they don't, and there's a reason for that, because that's not the mission. If it was the mission, we wouldn't even be talking right now. And I think the misunderstanding some people have, and I think some people in our government misunderstand this, and why they keep it so secret, is because they think they can gain a military advantage from it. And I have friends who are in the defense industry and in intelligence agency, retired. And the basic thing is they want to keep it secret because they want to figure out how they can outmaneuver and outdo their enemies, our perceived enemies or real enemies, whatever, on this earth. And when they want to figure out how can we strap a bomb to it, that's basically the kind of, in my view, very primitive thinking. When I've been told that this technology is not to be used to harm people, at least not intentionally. So anyway, that's all I know. I only have a little piece of the puzzle, Cameron. I mean, I think everybody only has a little piece of the puzzle. So what we need to do is put all these puzzle pieces together.
I was reading a research paper by an astrophysicist today, and he made a statement. He said that it's a miracle that we became what we are, and it's a bigger miracle that we're still here. And maybe we're meant to be. So do we have a purpose? I mean, you explained that, yes, we need to get along and we need to do these things, but what's our ultimate purpose? Is there an objective to us being here in the first place?
Yeah, and I think it's this idea of this leap of consciousness. Once we connect with who we are related to, the universe is open to us. Everything is possible. The life that my friend with Gene is dead to in our existence right here, this illusion that we're living in. But he is fully alive. His consciousness is fully alive. And he's very happy. He's no longer ill, he's no longer sick. He can do whatever he wants. And there is just love and happiness. And a very simple thing that he said is, I noticed when he came to me in a vision, he wasn't wearing shoes. And I don't know why I noticed it, but I noticed he wasn't wearing shoes. So I saw him, his form, and he didn't have shoes. And I said, why aren't you wearing shoes? And he said, we don't have to wear shoes. He said, I never liked them anyway. I don't have to wear them. So I don't. So he just took whatever form he wanted. He doesn't wear shoes, and he's perfectly happy. And he said, there's nothing to fear. And if we remove that fear, that frees us up to do incredible things, whether it's exploration or preservation or helping others, or maybe there's other areas of the universe that need our help once we've gone through this this leap of consciousness. Who knows what lies ahead? I'm very excited about it, actually.
Well, we're certainly experiencing something now that's different. It's definitely got a learning curve to it. And in ways we are benefiting. In other ways, it's not the best time to be a human. But, absolutely. I think people are learning how to relate to nature and ourselves in a completely different way. And that kind of brings me to a point where I was going to ask you, you're scheduled to be at Contact in the Desert on June 7th. Is that a firm date on that, or do they have a plan B? It looks like it could happen. It's
totally online this time. I think it's going to be later, like July.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like July.
Okay.
Yeah, because we didn't do it last year.
Right.
But yeah, so we're going to do it online, which is how I teach now. This is what I do. So it's not that different to me. I mean, I've always taught I've been teaching online for a very long time, but not all my classes, but some of them. But so I'll be at Contact in the Desert, and I'll be talking about Anzar quite a bit.
Okay.
And I kind of take a humorous view of it from an academic standpoint, So, this idea: how did an academic, a professor, a Fulbright scholar, suddenly bust out and start talking to aliens, and dead people and stuff. And so it's kind of that journey I think is rather interesting, some of which we talked about tonight. And the other thing is some research I did on PTSD and alien abductees or human abductees. And I found some very interesting information about that. And I'll be sharing that in a workshop as well.
Very cool. But the first place to look for Bruce is at Amazon.com. You can order the trilogy. Bruce, all 3 books available now?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, so Timeless Deja Vu, and Timeless Trinity. Timeless Trinity is also an audiobook. So those people who like audiobooks, which I like both print books and audiobooks for when I'm taking those long walks, they're nice. So those are all available. I also did a comic book with an alien hybrid character.
I got you. I know where you're going with that.
Yeah. I just wanted to say it the nice way.
Did you illustrate that?
What's that?
Did you illustrate the comic book?
No, Gary Dumm did. Gary Dumm's been doing illustrations since the 70s. He did Harvey P. Carr's. He's one of Harvey P. Carr's primary illustrators for American Splendor. So he's been around a very long time, Cleveland guy. So what I do is I write the stories. I do my rough illustrations. I give it to him, and he makes it beautiful.
It looks amazing.
He's got all the experience and knows sequential art and what I don't get. And so it's just Snark started out as my own illustrator when I was at Montana Tech. In fact, one of the reasons I dropped out of engineering school is because I was too busy drawing a cartoon strip, a comic strip. So, which was Snark, and that was in 1982. And when I dropped out of engineering school, Snark just kind of went away and just laid there for 37 years until I brought it back in 2019.
Wow.
And that's, behind me there.
Incredible job. Good looking cover on that. You can find that at Bruce's website. Again, the trilogy of Bruce's experiences that we've been discussing are available at Amazon.com. And his website is located in the podcast description. Check Bruce out there as well. Bruce Solheim, it's been a great pleasure. Nice to meet you. Great to hear your voice. I hope everybody's doing well in Southern California. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're opening up, I guess. So we'll see. Roll the dice.
Yeah,
happens.
Rolling the dice. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Cameron.
You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by Elion. You can find all Elion's work online at Heart Dance Records.